This is a monumental burial mound, the resting place of one of China's greatest emperors, Kangxi. But here is the shocking part: his remains and those of his empresses still lie underwater in the cold, flooded underground palace. How did an imperial tomb end up like this?
Hello everyone, I am now at the Jingling Mausoleum of Emperor Kangxi. Jingling was constructed on low-lying land, and as a result, its underground palace has remained flooded with water up to this day.
In Chinese, the character Jing invokes brightness and splendor, an image of prosperity, and that's exactly how many people remember the Kangxi era: long stability and steady growth. In 1661, the Shunzhi Emperor, Kangxi's father, died of smallpox. At court, the Grand Empress Dowager Xiaoling and the senior Manchu nobles wanted a successor who had already had the disease. Xuanye, Shunzhi's third son, had contracted smallpox and survived. He was believed to have gained immunity. That child would become the Kangxi Emperor. He reigned for 61 years and brought support from China's diverse peoples, and helped create the last great flourishing of Imperial China. That legacy is written quite literally on the monumental steles inside the Stele Pavilion for sacred virtue and divine marriage ahead. Jingling marked a turning point in Qing tomb design. Kangxi's reign was so long and this inscription so extensive that one stele couldn't fit both languages, so the court erected two, Manchu on the left, Chinese on the right. The pavilion we see today was once struck by lightning and severely burned. Restoration began in 2004 and has largely stabilized the structure in recent years, but for conservation reasons, the pavilion isn't open to the public. Why did Kangxi achieve so much? One answer lies in the inner court. His grandmother, Grand Empress Dowager Xiaoling, and his adoptive mother, Empress Dowager Xiaoling, helped shape his core belief: a ruler must govern with benevolence and lighten the burdens of the people. Behind the Great Stele Pavilion, the next landmark along the Spirit Way is a 5-arc stone bridge, a ceremony design that recurs throughout Ming-Qing Imperial tomb architecture. Its earliest royal precedent near Beijing appears in the Nuzhen-led Jing Dynasty after 1153. Later, both the Ming and the Qing adopted the same 5-arced form, an architecture expression of an old feng shui belief that water could carry auspicious fortune. The Nuzhens, the ancestors of the Manchus, was famed for military prowess, and the first serious strike to the young Kangxi Emperor did not come from foreign enemies, but from within the Manchu elite, the powerful regent Oboi. A veteran of the Qing Wars of Unification, Oboi became one of the 4 regents after the Shunzhi Emperor's death. Over time, he grew domineering and forcing the child emperor to accept his will. Then, in early summer 1669, as Oboi approached the Qianlong palace, Imperial guards disguised as palace wrestlers suddenly seized him. In one stroke, Kangxi broke the greatest internal threat to his rule. Remembering Oboi's past service, Kangxi imprisoned him instead of executing him, and largely forgave those in Oboi's circle who admitted fault, keeping many in office. It was an early example of Kangxi's political benevolence, and it helped secure the support of the Manchu aristocracy. Beyond the bridge, the Spirit Way is flanked by Shixiangsheng, stone guardian figures that represent the ceremonial attendants of the imperial household. At the front stand these 2 Wangzhu pillars, marking the formal beginning of the ceremonial procession. The first pile are lions, symbols of power and authority. Next come the elephants, associated with auspicious fortune. Look closely, their backs are carved with elegant dragon motifs, and each elephant bears a vase. In Chinese, vase is called ping, which echoes peace. Together, elephants carrying vases becomes a visual blessing for peace, stability, and enduring rule. The third pile are houses, and here is a modern echo. At Jingling today, visitors can still ride houses offered by local Manchu residents for about 15 to 13 renminbi yuan and take a few photos. The fourth pile are military officials, dressed in late Ming and early Qing style. On their right thumbs, we can spot an archer's submarine, banzhi, a practical tool for drawing the bow and a clear reminder of Manchu martial culture. The final pile are civil officials. Their robes look ceremonial, but the Manchu-style cut was shaped by a riding and archery tradition, designed for movement, not just a court ritual. Look at their waists. We can still see sabers hanging here. Even civil officials were expected to be armed, an unmistakable sign of the Qing elite's martial identity. At the end of the Stone Guardians, we arrive at the Dragon and Phoenix Gate. Most people imagine the familiar three-bay vision, but Jingling's gate is a different type, a 5-opening, 6-pillar layout. Its purpose is simple, to narrow your focus and pull your eyes toward the sacrificial princess gate ahead. But here is a twist. This gate was designed under the Qianlong Emperor, Kangxi's grandson. In other words, a later ruler helped shape the usual approach to his grandfather's tomb. To understand why, we have to go back to a war. During the Qing conquest and its aftermath, several former Ming commanders played crucial roles in securing the new dynasty. As a reward, the Qing court allowed them to rule 3 vast southern domains in the emperor's name, later known as the Three Feudatories, Pingxi, Jingnan, and Pingnan. But in 1673, these feudal princes turned their armies against the Qing Empire. At the same time, the Zheng regime in Taiwan, the most powerful Ming loyalist force left, also joined the conflict. The war dragged on for a decade, and it ended only in 1683, when the Zhengs surrendered and all 3 feudatory domains were abolished. It was the outbreak of this war that forced the cancellation of the ambitious plan to build a full siege of Spirit Way Stone Guardians and the Dragon and Phoenix Gate. And even after the war, the merciful Kangxi Emperor never restated these features. Not until 60 years later did his grandson, the Qianlong Emperor, restore the project and have them built for him. And Kangxi's benevolence was not only symbolic. During the wars against the 3 feudatories and Taiwan, many officials and commanders who had once sided with the opposing camp later returned to the Qing. Kangxi largely spared them, restored their positions, and treated them generously. Some would repay that mercy with fierce loyalty, even dying in later campaigns, including wars fought across Mongolia. Now we are approaching the Stele Pavilion on the Spirit Way, often called the smaller Stele Pavilion. Inside stands a single stone stele. It's the Qing state's official verdict on an emperor's life carved into stone. In Chinese political culture, the most solemn form of posthumous judgment is an emperor's posthumous title. It's meant to sum up an entire reign in a few carefully chosen words. And for the Kangxi Emperor, the virtue the court chose to highlight above all was benevolence. How could an emperor be so committed to benevolence? First, the guidance of two senior royal women, an influence we have already mentioned. Second, Kangxi deliberately placed himself under the guidance of Han Chinese scholar officials, especially those tied to the Hanling Academy and the inner court. Through formal daily lessons, they walked him through Chinese history and classical stagecraft. Beside the Stele Pavilion stand the east and west side rooms, where ritual offerings were prepared in a distinctly Manchu style. The east side room provided milk tea, and seasonal fruits. The west side room offered traditional Manchu pastries, known as bobo. In Qing Imperial China, every imperial mausoleum, whether for an emperor or an empress, had its own office of rites, responsible for organizing these offerings to the deceased, and much of that work began right here in these two side rooms. During Kangxi's years of personal rule, he cared deeply about whether ordinary people had enough to eat. Starting in 1711, he launched a province-by-province tax remission program. In the final 10 years of his reign, he reduced or cancelled taxes nationwide totaling 32.09 million taels of silver, a burden that, in terms of modern purchasing power, is often estimated at roughly 30 to 80 billion US dollars. Behind the two-side rooms stand the three-axis spiritual bridges. They marked the ceremonial passage for the imperial coffin, the emperor and the empress spirits, and the later emperors, princes, and senior officials coming to pay their respects. Now notice the subtle detail at Jingling Mausoleum. The Stele Pavilion stands in front of the bridges, but at Xiaoling Mausoleum, the mausoleum of Kangxi's father, the Shunzhi Emperor, the pavilion is placed behind them. This difference is deliberate. In Qing funeral design, filial piety had to be expressed through layout. A son's mausoleum was expected to differ from his father's as a sign of respect, and that's why one generation later, the pattern could echo across two generations. The bridge pavilion arrangement returns in a grandfather-grandson pairing, while remaining different between father and son. The site chosen for Jingling reflects the Qing tradition of filial piety, and it also reveals its cost. Look closely at the water beneath the nearby three-axis spiritual way bridges. The underground water here is abundant. In fact, this was never an ideal place for an underground burial chamber. The risk of flooding was obvious, yet traditional ritual logic demanded something else. In strict Chinese funeral principles, a son emperor's mausoleum was expected to stand to the east of his father's, as a sign of companionship and attendance. From a feng shui perspective, many Han Chinese officials strongly opposed building here. They warned that a flooded burial chamber would bring grave misfortune to the imperial house. Kangxi, however, saw the issue through an older cultural lens. For him, the tomb's position east of his father's Xiaoling was non-negotiable, so he made the decision and chose a site despite the objects, and the consequences is haunting. Because Jingling was built in such a water-rich ground, the underground palace eventually flooded, leaving the remains of the Kangxi Emperor and his empresses submerged in cold water. According to later accounts, when the burial chamber was last opened and closed in the 1950s, the water inside was so high that workers had to wade in at neck level, and the plan to clear the chamber and recover the remains was ultimately abandoned. Behind the three-axis spiritual bridges stand two great tile buildings. These were the old brackets for the H banner scards, and they remain remarkably well preserved today. In the Qing Dynasty, the on-site guard force for a single imperial mausoleum was about 109 men, organized into rotating squads. Those troops were Manchu 8-banner soldiers. Across the Eastern Qing Tombs as a whole, the 8-banner garrison numbered around 1,200. Kangxi was not only merciful to his subjects, he was also remarkably lenient toward his own sons, and it was precisely that excessive compassion that would later trap him in relentless suffering and ultimately led him to his death. In the next episode, we will pass through the main gate ahead, Longen Gate, and step deeper into the mausoleum complex to see what lies inside. And as we do, we will uncover the brutal power struggles that unfolded with Kangxi's court. That's all for today. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.